Hello, hello, hello. How are we all doing? How are we all? Smiley Brandon 21, Antonio here, Jamie here, of course. Antonio complaining once again. I am just marginally late. I'm not actually late. The thing is, I start the stream at 1:30, but then it takes the stream like a couple of minutes to kind of kick into gear a little bit. As you could tell by the countdown, I don't just randomly start it from like 26 seconds. But shall we talk about Monza? Shall we put some headphones on, first and foremost, so that I can actually hear the Monza Grand Prix? That would be good. And discuss Monza going into it. Let's have a little look at the quali board from yesterday. There it is. And talk about it. Torn between record-breaking Max win, ironic McDonald's uniform victory. Should we talk about that then? We'll start at the top. Carlos Sainz starts on pole position in front of the Tifosi, a Ferrari on the top step. And I know what you mean, actually. It's difficult, right? Because if you look at those top four, I'd quite like any of them to get a victory today. I'd love to see a Ferrari victory in front of the Tifosi, particularly Carlos Sainz. Of the two Ferrari drivers, I would say I'm marginally more of a Carlos Sainz fan. Obviously, he did help out McLaren for a couple of years there, had the connection with Lando Norris. Like, I do really enjoy Carlos Sainz and Carlos Sainz being on the grid. And therefore, if I was going to pick a Ferrari driver to get the victory, I would go for Carlos Sainz. Obviously, his fourth pole position yesterday, and he's just looked on it this weekend. I think it's the first time in a while where we've seen Carlos Sainz, and he looks really comfortable in that Ferrari package and just seems to know exactly how to get it right every single time. Like, if we look at how his sector times actually played out, he was just rapid in that middle sector. And if anything, that's the trickiest sector of the Monza track. Okay, in the first sector, you've got a very tough first corner, and we heard Nico Rosberg on Friday talk about how difficult it is to get that just right, where you've got a break from literally the top speed that you will get out of a Formula One car all year, pretty much, at the end of that Monza straight. You've got to get as much out of that car as you possibly can, and then stop it on a dime, because that first second chicane is like crazy slow speed in comparison to the rest of the Monza track, and you've got almost no downforce helping you out with that braking. So, okay, Max Verstappen was fairly good in that first sector. He got that right. But the second sector in Monza is a little bit more tricky. You're in the forest. You got to find your way through the trees. You're navigating around a couple of very tricky lesmos. And also another little chicane in there as well. Not quite a slow speed and not obviously the top speed that you have going down the straight. But I think the fact that he managed to master that second sector in particular, for me, showed that he was really, really good at holding on to that Ferrari car in the right zones and making sure that that Ferrari had the right balance this weekend. Because it does also have that straight line speed advantage. It is still the quickest in a straight line, up there with the Williams car as well, as always. But the Ferrari also seems quite stable through that middle sector too. I don't know whether Ferrari have literally just built this year's car with Monza in mind, because it looks so much more competitive this weekend in Monza compared to literally everywhere else that we have been so far this season. And it's like the Ferrari early 2022. Like, it's like the Ferrari of Bahrain last year, where you're like, okay, Ferrari are properly in this, and they might have the best package this weekend, bar Max Verstappen and Red Bull. Obviously, he starts in second place just behind Carlos Sainz. And I think Red Bull have done kind of what they did last year, to be honest with you. I think they've known that they are by far and away the quickest car so far this season. And therefore, they've been able to take it quite easy in terms of the races and qualifying. But now it's becoming a little bit more competitive. Now that we're seeing Ferrari, Mercedes, McLaren, Williams, obviously Aston Martin towards the beginning of the year as well. Now that we're seeing lots more of those teams becoming a little bit more competitive, especially when it comes to race pace, I think we've seen what Red Bull did last year, where they kind of took away from the qualifying pace of the Red Bull just a little bit. You know, if we look at last year, what did they get? Ferrari got 12 pole positions last year, I want to say, with Charles Leclerc. Charles Leclerc got 9 or 10, and Carlos Sainz got a couple in there as well. Like, I think Ferrari, the fact that they were so good in qualifying last year, just kind of played into the fact that actually Red Bull was steering their car towards the races a little bit more. And I think Red Bull are getting towards that point in the season again where they're like, okay, maybe we will only qualify third, fourth, fifth. But when it comes to the races, when it comes to the actual thing that counts, the actual thing you get points for on a Sunday, we'll be able to make up positions. And I think they've kind of steered the Red Bull towards that today. And that's the only thing that worries me with Max Verstappen is, okay, he wasn't super quick yesterday. He wasn't like blitzing past people by tenths of a second. But today, when he's in a race pace, when he's got the tires warmed up to his perfect section, I don't know, is worrying me. It's very, very worrying me. Guess how long it takes until Verstappen takes first place? I think, well, obviously he's going to have the run down towards turn 1. He is on the inside line going down towards turn 1, but you'd hope that Carlos Sainz will get off the line quick enough, and also the Ferrari does have the top line speed advantage. So let's hope that Max Verstappen doesn't get into the lead off the first straight. The DRS also should be a little bit less effective here than it is elsewhere. Obviously, the DRS comes into effect when the rear wing opens, but they effectively aren't running rear wings this weekend. Like, you've seen all of the teams, they're running the skinniest rear wings that you've ever seen on a Formula One car. And therefore, it's likely that the DRS won't have too much of an effect. So if Carlos Sainz can come out of the first couple of laps in the lead by maybe a second or so, I think then we're looking at Max Verstappen having to do something strategy-wise. And I think that's quite an interesting prospect. And then you've got George Russell in there as well. George Russell, the Mercedes car hasn't looked amazing this weekend. They've struggled to really get it into the operating window that's been perfect for them. I think we saw that most with Lewis yesterday and definitely Friday as well. Lewis a little bit more competitive yesterday, even though he is starting in 8th place. But George Russell being able to kind of click with this slightly unbalanced Mercedes package that they have this weekend. And I think he could also be in contention for something a little bit spectacular. You know, we've seen George Russell get strategies right in the past. He definitely got it wrong in Zandvoort last time out. But, you know, you think back to last year when we were talking about George Russell and the fact that he couldn't stop finishing in the top 5, even though the Mercedes car was absolutely trash. And a lot of the time it was because he got quite lucky with strategy. And maybe he can find just a little bit of that luck. And then George Russell is in contention for it. So I think all 4 of those top 4 are very interesting to see. Obviously, Sergio Perez should also join them in that battle for, if not the lead, then the podium positions in 5th place. He's in the Red Bull after all. And then it gets a little bit interesting. You've got that top 5. And then I think Albon, I just don't know about Albon moving forwards, you know. I think the way that Williams have set up their car a lot this season has been quite defensive. But then last time out in Zandvoort, I thought if it was been a dry race and they got if they got it right, then maybe Albon could have fought forwards a little bit and maybe just put a couple of drivers under pressure. I feel like this track in particular really suits the Williams car as well. So Albon, I'm 50-50 on whether he's going to just stay still, move forward, go backwards. I'm not too sure right now. I think I need to see the first 5 or 6 laps of race pace with that Williams car to really justify my opinion on where they are in this season and where they're going to be at the end of this Monza Grand Prix. Piastri and Norris, I think, did a really good job yesterday. 7th and 9th place. I was expecting Fernando Alonso and Lance Stroll to be right in the mix with the McLaren, so I thought they'd be quite close to one another. But actually, the McLaren looks a lot quicker than the Aston Martin, at least in qualifying trim yesterday. It's still got quite a chunky rear wing, unfortunately, the McLaren car. I think if we look at, you know, the race pace of the Ferraris, the Red Bulls, it's like they are so much quicker in a straight line than that McLaren is even close to being. But then the McLaren has pretty good traction out of the corners, so it should be able to, if not defend overly well on the straights, maybe come back at people just out of the corners a little bit and make it awkward for the other drivers because it's got that little bit more downforce. It can take a slightly different line through the corners. And again, I think Piastri Norris might be on the defensive today rather than looking forward and making positions kind of going up the grid. I think it's kind of a make sure nothing gets past us kind of race from Piastri and Norris. And then we move into the rounding out of the top 10 with Fernando Alonso. An interesting one. Oh, Logan Sarge. Oh, we'll get to Logan Sarge. We will get to Logan Sarge. Don't you worry yourself. We'll get there. But Fernando Alonso, what do I expect from Fernando Alonso today? The Aston Martin is terrible in a straight line. The Aston Martin doesn't have the greatest top speed. And the Aston Martin doesn't look comfortable on this track. I don't know what he can do. Maybe the Aston Martin set up a little bit more for race trim than it was qualifying. Because qualifying yesterday wasn't great for the Aston Martin team. Like, we'll get to Lance Stroll in a long time, actually, because we've got quite a few drivers between Alonso and Lance Stroll to talk about. But if you think about Fernando Alonso today, again, I'm going to say this for a lot of drivers. I think he's going to be on the defensive for a lot of it. And I don't really know who moves forwards in this. I think everyone's kind of stacked themselves quite nicely, and I can't see a lot of overtaking happening, if I'm honest. Because I think everyone's kind of where they should be. Which it's slightly disappointing. But I guess that does happen when you have a qualifying for the first time in a while where it hasn't been absolutely crazy. Like, we didn't have a red flag. We didn't have any rain. We didn't have changeable conditions. We just had a pure qualifying, hard compound tire, medium compound tire, soft compound tire. Everyone kind of got themselves into the right positions, I would say, in terms of their pace this weekend. There's a few outliers, but generally speaking, I think everyone's kind of where they should be. So Fernando Alonso, I think, will struggle again to kind of make up points. Maybe just a finish in like 8th, 9th, 10th for Fernando Alonso, somewhere along those lines. Takes home a chunk of points for Aston Martin. Will be good enough for the weekend for him. Alpines were a bit slow. Alpine are dreadful. I mean, that's a power unit thing, though. The problem is, should we jump to Alpine in 17th and 18th place? Because the Alpine power unit just has nowhere near as much pace as, well, any of the others. Obviously, they are the only team that uses the Renault power unit. Mercedes obviously bring their own. Ferrari have their own. Red Bull have their own power unit now as well. And they have lots of customer teams throughout the grid. But Renault and Alpine are the fourth engine constructor right now. And at the moment, they just have the weakest overall engine package when it comes to that availability of proper straight line speed, getting that speed going, acceleration down the straight. Like, the power that they have is just down on everybody else. So even though I think the Alpine package as like an aerodynamic package isn't terrible, and we've seen some surprise results from them over the course of the year. We saw, obviously, Ocon get a podium in Monaco, Gasly get a podium last time out as well. So it's not impossible for the Alpine car to be properly quick. It's just when it comes to this kind of track where it's all about top speed, it's all about low downforce, it's all about as slim a rear wing as you can run and making sure that your car is as stable as possible whilst having almost no downforce from the rear end. They just don't have that ability. And that's why they were out in Q1 yesterday. They couldn't get the hard compound tire to work for them. They couldn't get the temperature in there. And now, 17th and 18th, am I expecting them to be in the points today? Absolutely not. Am I expecting them to even get close to the points today? Also, no. So I think it's just all done and dusted for Alpine already. They might as well just pack up and go home, like Otmar did just before the Belgian Grand Prix. Let's get packing and go home a little bit early, shall we? I think Yuki Tsunoda and Liam Lawson's an interesting one. Obviously, 11th and 12th place for Tsunoda and Lawson. Again, Tsunoda trying to get points. Liam Lawson, if he could get points, that'd be very, very interesting. Obviously, Nick De Vries managed a 12th place finish in his very short 10-race Formula 1 career. So if Liam Lawson can match that in his second ever Formula 1 race, maybe he'll be able to get there. And will he jump up in front of De Vries in the championship? I think it will depend on their second best result, which for Liam Lawson might be good enough to get in front of Nick De Vries. I'll have to have a look at it. I can't remember now, but Yuki Tsunoda kind of looking for his second third or fourth championship points finish, won't it? But it would just, every single time he's got points, it's been 1 point. I was trying to think, Yuki Tsunoda's got 3 points to his name so far. Yeah. And 3 points finishes. So it's just a weird one for Yuki Tsunoda, isn't it? Can he do any better than 11th place? Can I see him going forwards? Maybe if that AlphaTauri package is a little bit quicker in the straights than I think it is. They didn't look incredible in the straights in the free practice analysis that I did, though. Maybe they've been able to find some pace. It'd be great if Liam Lawson got some points. I'll tell you that. It'd be great if Liam Lawson managed to get some points. That'd be very, very interesting. Then we've got kind of the Ferrari-powered teams. Hulkenberg, Bottas, Joe, Magnussen. Sort of spread throughout 13, 14, 16, 19. Kevin Magnussen for me, another one where it's just like, didn't get enough out of the car yesterday, did you, Kevin? Got really outperformed by Nico once again. I'll be honest, I wasn't expecting any of those guys really to get through to Q2. I was expecting the Alpines to get through to Q2 though. So I guess if you jump the Alpines up a couple of places, then like Bottas does drop into that bottom 15, so does Hulkenberg as well. So I wasn't really expecting a lot of those cars to get through, but Hulkenberg and Bottas kind of outdid themselves a little bit for me, and I think showed once again that they are clearly the quickest team right now in a straight line, or like Haas anyway, clearly the quickest team when it comes to straight line speed, and the Ferrari power unit does help with that. But they still don't really have the pace to actually fight 4 points consistently with the Haas. They're just showing a little replay of last year's start. Where we see Ferrari obviously took the lead here last year. Max Verstappen, though, went on to win. Just made up position after position, scowled. Ooh, can't remember that position actually being made up from Max Verstappen. Going down towards turn 11. It's very nice. A little overtake from Max Verstappen last year. Obviously, he just cut his way through the grid last year. Managed to get himself right back up to the top step. Will he be able to do that from second place today? That is the question. Will Ferrari be able to do something? At least Ferrari 1 and 3, they've got the option to go for slightly different strategies. And if they go for the slightly different strategies, maybe one of them plays out a little bit better. And therefore, the Ferrari can come out on top by kind of splitting their two drivers and going for two different things over the course of the race today. Who else haven't we touched upon? Logan Sargent. That was the one, wasn't it? Logan Sargent going to have his usual DNF, said Smiley Brandon. I really hope not. I really hope not for Logan Sargent. This is an opportunity for the Williams team to score points, as we can see with Alex Albon, but unfortunately, just still not quite there, is he, Logan Sargent? There's just something missing from Logan Sargent's repertoire of skills. And I know that he's a rookie. I know that we have to give him a little bit more time. But then when it comes to the end of the season, if he's the only driver that has taken part in every Grand Prix and hasn't scored a point and had multiple opportunities to score points, obviously got through to Q3 in Netherlands, should have probably got through to Q3 yesterday considering the pace of that Williams car, but made a little mistake. So it's just so tricky with Logan Sargent right now, isn't it? Because he is probably, well, statistically, he's the worst driver on the grid right now. But that doesn't necessarily mean he's a bad driver. Like, he might just need a little bit more time. Lance Stroll, though. Right down in 20th. Right at the end, we'll talk Lance Stroll. Because starting in 20th place, Lance Stroll, and not looking amazing this weekend. Obviously, I know he missed out on free practice 1 because Felipe Drugovich was in the car. I know he missed out on free practice 2 because his Aston Martin didn't work. But you got at some point you gotta start questioning these constant poor results from Lance Stroll. The Aston Martin team still backing him though. Mike Crack came out and was like, no, he's still good. We all still believe in him. But right at the bottom of the standings once again. All week, all I've had is this curse, but how do people think it will happen? Well, the curse is that if you win, then the next season you actually DNF. So technically, what we should be looking for is how on earth does Verstappen DNF from this Grand Prix? Is it going to be reliability? Probably not. Like, considering the fact that the reliability of the Red Bull car is pretty good, in fact, pretty impeccable every single time around. Like, obviously, they had the start of last season where they were having some power unit issues, but then the reliability since then has been pretty much perfect. And then if we look at, getting a pit stop wrong maybe, and like making a mistake there, probably not. So it's going to be an incident, isn't it? If it's Max Verstappen DNFing, it's going to be an incident of some kind. It's going to be some form of collision or maybe a mistake. We did see him in the gravel yesterday during qualifying, just dipped his tyre in the gravel while pushing it through that middle sector. Maybe he makes a mistake somewhere along the line, but seems very un-Max Verstappen to make a mistake, especially during the race. He often makes a little mistake maybe during qualifying or during a free practice. He very, very rarely makes a mistake during a race. He just has a slightly different mentality, I think, going into it. But yeah, I'd love to know your predictions. How on earth does Max Verstappen come to an end? How does he DNF from this race? Is it turn one? Does he go for a move on Carlos Sainz? We've seen Max Verstappen go for moves on Mercedes down to turn one and not quite come out, I was going to say on top, but he was very much on top of Lewis Hamilton, wasn't he? Quite literally. I feel like for Max Verstappen, he doesn't need to be that aggressive this time around. So it's probably going to be someone trying to overtake him, which again is only really going to happen down towards turn one. So I feel like as long as Max Verstappen finishes the first lap and is kind of okay at the end of it, probably will finish the race. Unless there's some sort of incident where he comes out of the pits and he's like right next to somebody. The Italian Grand Prix. Someone's sitting in a tree. I mean, there is forest all the way around the Monza track, although quite a lot of the forest fell down during a storm. So a little bit different to the Monza track that we're used to seeing in terms of that kind of coverage of trees that we see. So we're just watching a little Ferrari piece. It would be great to see Ferrari on the top step of the podium here today. Obviously, Charles Leclerc did it back in 2019. It's the last time we had a Ferrari on the top step. But then also we've seen Gasly, we've seen Daniel Ricciardo. We have seen some, pretty crazy Monza Grand Prix in the last few years. So maybe it will just deliver once again. Maybe Monza is just one of those tracks now. A bit like Brazil. I feel like Brazil is always a really, really good race. Doesn't matter if it's dry or wet or inters. Like, Brazil always seems to be really, really entertaining. And Monza might just get there. We've got about 5 minutes until we kick off for this one. Just seeing the graphics come up. I'm going to very quickly pee. And then I'll throw this up for you just in case. But I should be back, within 5 minutes. I hope so. Probably be back within a minute. I'm back. Leclerc turn 1, lap 1, allowing Sainz to win. Ooh, that'd be interesting. If Max obviously gets taken out by Leclerc, of all people. Joe will struggle as well. Yeah, we didn't really talk about Joe, but probably will struggle. Down in 16th. Starting on the medium tyre by the looks of things. Hulkenberg might get 10th. The Haas just in race pace just isn't there, man. The Haas's race pace everywhere is pretty poor. Might be a little bit better here. My prediction, lap 1, Verstappen gives Leclerc damage. Wow. Lawson locks up into Tsunoda. Oh, I really hope not. Gasly retires. Lap 12. Why lap 12? Why all the laps? Lap 12. Wow. Lap 52, Monza curse forces Verstappen to retire. Just one lap away from the end. No, I don't know. I think if Max Verstappen retires, I think it's down to turn 1, like first or second lap. Just like down to turn 1, tries something on Sainz or tries something on Leclerc and takes it away. Maybe Ferrari was sandbagging just so they can end Red Bull's streak at Monza. Engine failure? Yeah, engine failure is quite common here, actually, because most of the lap is full throttle. As you say, 75%. I think 80-something% of the lap, you're accelerating in some way. Don't even speak about it. Actually, yeah. If anyone's engine's going to go wrong, it's probably Ferrari's, but don't tell anyone. What football kit is that? It's not a football kit, actually. It is a Formula 1 shirt, but it's just designed to look like a football kit. Which is very kind. It was sent to me by a company I did a thing for that I'll find out the name of momentarily. But yeah, they do have some really good designs, actually. They're just like Formula 1, like jerseys, I guess. This was Gasly back at AlphaTauri, though. This is like the AlphaTauri 2022 trim that they had. It's probably some new ones. I should probably get one for the 2023 season. Maybe a Gasly again, now in Alpine colours. Might get a Lando one. I just thought like the blue worked quite nicely with the orange. It's got a little bit of McLaren in there, just for me. Here we go then. Formation lap. We're getting underway. My hair's really annoying me today. Don't know what's. Looking like a one-stop strategy, they're saying. Mediums onto hards or hards onto softs. Hards onto softs would be very interesting if somebody decided to go for that. Is it starting late? Not that I can see. Oh, maybe a little bit, actually. Yeah, a couple of minutes. It is 2:01 already. But we're on the formation lap now, so it'll be underway in a minute and kind of 50 seconds or so. Usually quite a slow lap around Monza. Carlos Sainz, obviously, starting on pole position. Leading the cars around, just coming towards the third sector now. Obviously, under the bridge. The old track still hidden in the trees there. The old banking from the Monza circuit. Interesting that the Monza track used to be like known as one of the most dangerous Formula 1 circuits. With all the banked corners, and it was kind of a figure of 8 configuration before. But that didn't last very long. That was like back in the 60s. Ferrari will one stop. Possible minimal risk. I think everyone's one stopping, to be honest with you. It looks like the medium to hard compound tire is the preferred strategy of the majority. Like you can see, most starting on the medium. Lewis Hamilton starting on the hard. Bottas and Magnussen joining him. But generally speaking, looks like most people are going to go medium onto hard. But those guys starting on the hard, if they can keep their position, they then go onto the soft tyre right at the end. Unless they go hard onto medium. But then again, there was a... Oh! No! Liam Lawson! No, he did so well. Oh, it's Yuki. Engine failure. Yuki Tsunoda engine failure. I couldn't see who it was. I just assumed it was Liam Lawson. It's really bad of me, actually, isn't it? It's Yuki. Oh, so they're going to have to move that car now. Yuki Tsunoda, some form of engine failure in the AlphaTauri. Didn't even finish the formation lap. So the cars will line themselves up on the grid, but then they will get another formation lap now because we're going to have to wait for that AlphaTauri to be moved out of the way. Yuki Tsunoda stopped in a pretty awkward place, actually, kind of on the grass. Down the final kind of back straight. It's an aborted start, and Carlos Sainz gets going once again. And everybody is going to have another formation lap. So there is just one now. One AlphaTauri. Liam Lawson is left in. How did Stroll manage to get P20? Hey, that's P19. That's P19 now. I don't know if they're going to be able to move that AlphaTauri. They're looking like they're struggling. Charles Leclerc already on the radio. Car not turning very well in the right-hand corners. On the data, though, it looks fine. So maybe just something that Leclerc needs to get a little bit more temperature in the tyres, possibly, or just get himself into a slightly better groove with that Ferrari car. And another formation lap. So here we go then. Carlos Sainz coming around towards the final sector once again. Under that bridge, as we talked about just one lap previous. Tsunoda I love, man. I love Tsunoda as well. Third favourite driver is interesting, that you've got like a tier list. But yeah, I've really enjoyed Tsunoda being in Formula 1. I really love Yuki. But yeah, you can just see at the end of that back straight there on the right-hand side, Yuki Tsunoda's AlphaTauri car is still there. And it hasn't moved at all, I don't think. I think they're going to need to get something out there and get the AlphaTauri car with some sort of vehicle, unfortunately. Ooh, yeah, there's a lot of smoke coming into Yuki Tsunoda's car there. You just hear it literally come to a halt. And everything that looked like it was going forwards. Oh, Max Verstappen. Expecting the race start to be aborted. I think that makes sense considering Yuki Tsunoda's car still hasn't moved since they were there. If a Red Bull engine went out, it was Max. Well, if one goes out, maybe they're all under pressure. Seeing the teams running to the end of the pit lane, though. Just kind of getting in the way of the Williams car right and garage right now. But the Red Bulls, the Aston Martin guys already down there as well. Scoop Jam making some jumps there, just a touch, I think. think everyone's a bit confused at what's going on. Like, there's a lot of kind of hesitation right now. Oh. It's stuck in gear. It's stuck in gear, is what they're saying. So Yuki Tsunoda's car can't be like pushed backwards, because I think that's what they were trying to do. They were trying to push it back into the escape road that was behind the AlphaTauri. But if it's stuck in gear, obviously the wheels will lock when you push it backwards. So Yuki Tsunoda now jumping into the truck, the AlphaTauri car on the back of said truck. And the marshals are now directing the teams and saying that we're trying to avoid an aborted start. And there are the mechanics then. So that is a full aborted start by the looks of things. Cars, mechanics will now run onto the track. I see they closed the gate off, and basically the teams are waiting for approval to get through that gate. So another formation lap to come. And dropping the laps to a 51 lap race, effectively, we will have. So you'll see up here, it was 53. We now technically have 52 laps left because we've done an extra formation lap, and we'll do an extra formation lap again. So that will drop it down to a 51 lap race for these guys. Obviously, they can't do the rest, and because they have a restricted amount of fuel. The cars are fueled up fully before the Grand Prix, and they can't put any more fuel in them whilst they're still on the circuit like they are. So we can't just continue on and have a 53 lap race like we thought we would. Instead, we'll have 51. As we see the Ferrari mechanics putting the tyre warmers back onto Charles Leclerc's car. And an umbrella for Ferrari's number one driver in the 16 car. But now we've got Carlos Sainz ahead of Charles Leclerc. Ahead of Charles Leclerc in the championship as well, actually. I'm wrong, aren't I? Yeah, Carlos Sainz 3 points ahead of Charles Leclerc. So actually, Carlos Sainz technically Ferrari's number one driver right now in the championship and in the race as well. Not yet given any indication of timings. Obviously, the team's running out there, getting everything clipped back onto the Ferrari car. But not yet seeing any kind of indication of when we're going to get back to racing once again. The AlphaTauri has completely been removed. So we saw a truck come, pick up the AlphaTauri car, pop it on the back. Yuki Tsunoda jumped into the cabin as well. And they are back in the pit lane. Yuki Tsunoda, I'm sure we'll hear from him a little bit later on. So we're just waiting for some kind of confirmation of a new start time, which I'm hoping will be soon, because there is nothing actually happening on track. What happened in the race? We have technically started the race, but we also haven't technically started the race. So the formation lap took place. During that formation lap, Yuki Tsunoda came to a halt right at the end of the third sector, just coming up to the final corner. Yuki Tsunoda's AlphaTauri engine looked like just completely blew up. And thank you, R. Liam, for subscribing. Appreciate that, mate. Yuki Tsunoda's car completely stopped. And because it completely stopped, he pulled over to the side of the track, thought that he was able to, pull over to that side and get the car out of the way. Instead, kind of left the car in a bit of a tricky situation to move. the stewards couldn't actually go out and get the car back in again. So they had to go and get a little lorry, pick up the AlphaTauri car, pick up Yuki Tsunoda, move everyone back off again. So we did a second formation lap in the hope that we'd be able to get the AlphaTauri moved in time. It wasn't moved in time, and now we've had an aborted race start. And because of the aborted race start, we're now looking at the tires. Sorry, tire warmers back on cars. What I was going to say. We're looking at drivers stationary on the grid once again. Nobody's gotten out of the car though. So clearly thinking that it will start sometime soon with these cars. Because if the drivers were sure that it was going to be, a considerable stoppage, we usually see them jump out of the car. Whenever we have like a red flag or anything like that, we often see the drivers getting back into the garage. The Ferrari fans out in full force. Do I do these streams every race weekend? I do, Adam. I do indeed, for qualifying and the race. And I feel like I should do like the occasional free practice, but often I'm not free for the free practice. So maybe in the future I'll be able to get a free practice one going. But I do indeed. 10 minutes or so. Oh, there we go. Formation lap will start at 3:20 local time. So that is 5 minutes from now. So we're waiting 5 minutes to the start of the Grand Prix. Fernando Alonso, eyes closed, envisaging an Aston Martin podium here this afternoon. I think it will only happen in his dreams, but he can dream. Let him dream. How I thought about Lawson so far? He's done, mate. Yeah, incredibly so. Like the fact that he was able to even finish the Dutch Grand Prix last time around in ridiculous conditions was very, very impressive. Like I know that he wasn't super quick, but I wasn't expecting him to be when he had to be on the intermediates, then on the dries, then on the intermediates, then on the wets, then on the dries again. It was like, everything was just going absolutely mental for Liam Lawson last weekend. And then this weekend, he's just behind his teammate in terms of qualifying. Yuki Tsunoda 11th, Liam Lawson 12th. Yuki Tsunoda's AlphaTauri has come to a stop. So Liam Lawson, the lone AlphaTauri now, after a season of driver changes, we've seen Yuki Tsunoda be the number one on Nick de Vries. We then see Nick de Vries replaced by Daniel Ricciardo. We've seen Daniel Ricciardo pick up an injury and Liam Lawson come in. And now Liam Lawson is the lone Red Bull, the lone AlphaTauri driver out on track. He's got to do it all by himself this afternoon, bless him. But very, very impressed with the job that he's done so far. Nico Hulkenberg, though, will be looking to pounce on the fact that Liam Lawson, only his second full race in Formula One, only his second weekend in that AlphaTauri car, and obviously last weekend was so difficult and so strange that Liam Lawson, under a lot of pressure from Nico Hulkenberg, Valtteri Bottas as well, just behind, two very experienced drivers behind him. Yuki Tsunoda, frustrated, I think. Yeah, it's confirmation. I was just trying to see if there was any kind of confirmation on what happened to Yuki Tsunoda's car. I mean, it looked like an engine failure. He said on the radio it was an engine failure, but it's now been confirmed it was like a full engine failure in the AlphaTauri. Hence the smoke that billowed out of the AlphaTauri car. But as we can now see again, the AlphaTauri has been collected. And Max Verstappen going for 10 victories in a row. It would be a record-breaking win. And he's even got a special helmet to hopefully commemorate that 10th victory in a row. I do actually quite like it. It's very reminiscent of his first helmet that he had when he was karting, which was based on his dad's Formula One helmet. So it's very kind of retro. Jos Verstappen will be very pleased indeed, but still has the Red Bull decals on it. I think it's the one thing that is a little bit annoying about Red Bull when they do these kind of helmets is the fact that the Red Bull team are so adamant that you have to have a huge Red Bull logo on both sides of the helmet. It kind of restricts how flavorful you can get with your helmet design when you do a special helmet, doesn't it? Whereas you look at like Charles Leclerc's this weekend, the yellow looks so good, man. It's just beautiful. And like you definitely wouldn't get away with like the Lando Norris a beach ball helmet or basketball helmet or anything like that at Red Bull. That would be a no-go. But I'm sure he won't mind if he gets 10 race victories in a row and gets a third world championship. I'm sure he'll be more than happy to have a Red Bull on the side of his helmet if they can guide him to another world championship this year and every single record imaginable. Here we go, then. We are seeing the jacks getting taken away from the cars. We're getting tyre blankets partially taken off. And the cars being put back on the track once again, ready for the third formation lap that we will see this afternoon. The engineers take their steps away from the car, step over to the side of the track, and Carlos Sainz will get us going once again. New confirmed start, literally like 30 seconds time. Right now is the confirmed start time. Here we go, we're back underway. And Carlos Sainz down towards turn one for the third time in a formation lap. So we will only see 51 laps of this Grand Prix after a couple of extra formation laps. Didn't actually hear from Yuki Tsunoda as of yet. Maybe he sort of wanted to go into the garage and just actually check in with what happened with his engineer and stuff. Thought we'd have heard from him in that stoppage. Just to kind of get any kind of confirmation from his point of view, but maybe that'll come a little bit later on in the race. Alex Albon we're on board with, starting in 6th place. Behind his old team, of course, Sergio Perez, the man who replaced Alex Albon. So, a little bit of a motivation for Alex Albon to maybe try and get one over on Sergio Perez. And here we go once again then. Carlos Sainz just going past where Yuki Tsunoda's car came to a stop. He's going to back up the pack and slow down the grid so that he's got a little bit less time that he has to spend stationary on that top spot of the grid. Although, as he's just released himself, Max Verstappen's done the same, just backed up and backed off the back of that Ferrari. Carlos Sainz knows that those tyres are going to get a little bit chilly when he's waiting for the rest of the cars to come back around. Okay, the AlphaTauris coming around. Alpines, sorry. Just thinking of Liam Lawson in the AlphaTauri and keeping an eye on him at the start. But the Alpines coming around towards the back of the pack. Lance Stroll will be the final car to take his grid slot. Carlos Sainz very actually early into his grid position. Max Verstappen maybe just backing up the pack a little bit, making the Ferrari wait that little bit longer. And there is Lance Stroll at the back, followed by the medical car. Does take position at the back of the grid before we get the green flag to get us underway. There we are, then there is the green flag. The lights start, and a slightly shorter 51-lap Monza Grand Prix gets underway. Let's see if Carlos Sainz can hold on to the lead down towards turn 1. Charles Leclerc is going to be right behind him. A nice little hole punched in the air by the Ferrari. And Charles Leclerc is going to try and go up the inside. It looks like Max Verstappen doesn't quite get it done, but is now under pressure from George Russell. George Russell bumping over the curbs a little bit, but everyone through turn 1 and turn 2 fairly cleanly. Doesn't happen overly often. Charles Leclerc, though, now under pressure once again from George Russell. George Russell having a look at the side of the Ferrari. Is going to have a little go down towards the chicane. Not this time around. Let's see if everyone filters in behind. Yeah, everyone actually following on quite nicely. Oscar Piastri has made a move on Alex Albon. Albon dropping down to 7th place. Piastri up into 6th. Lando Norris has also got in front of Lewis Hamilton in amongst all that. Nico Hulkenberg has made an incredible jump forwards up into the points positions already. Fernando Alonso will be frustrated to have dropped out of the points. Liam Lawson has held on to 12th place. Obviously started 11th technically, but will be happy to hold on to that position. Logan Sargent also jumping up to 13th already. Bottas, Joe, Ocon, Gasly going 2 by 2 in 14, 15, 16, 17. Magnussen and Stroll still the 2 cars at the back. Let's see then. Verstappen down towards turn 1. Is he going to be able to put Carlos Sainz under any form of pressure? No, not this time around. Max Verstappen still around 7/10 off Carlos Sainz. Alex Albon has a little look at Oscar Piastri, but isn't able to get past the McLaren this time around. As we go on to lap 2 of this Grand Prix. Albon is all over the back of Oscar Piastri. Maybe he's going to have a little go down towards the chicane. Alex Albon breaks late, goes in, has the inside line, obviously exiting the chicane, and Alex Albon makes that position back once again. So the Williams back up into 6th place. And Oscar Piastri, after that move on lap 1, loses out on lap 2. And they go back to where they were before. Lando Norris, his teammate, just behind Oscar Piastri now. Also having a little look. Wow, okay. Interesting to see Verstappen dropping off the Ferrari even more so now. Nearly a second off of Carlos Sainz. But still in the DRS range just about. DRS obviously not enabled until next lap and needs to keep himself within that second of the Ferrari. The Ferrari super quick through that middle sector still though. And Carlos Sainz just able to edge out a little bit, but he's going to punch a lovely hole in the air for Max Verstappen going down this main straight, which gives the Red Bull a bit of an advantage going down towards turn 1. But Sainz now trying to get out of that DRS range. Charles Leclerc also within DRS of Max Verstappen. Sainz sets the fastest lap of the Grand Prix. And you can see just a 10th and a bit ahead of Max Verstappen. Here's a replay of the start then. And everyone very organised actually. Carlos Sainz comes across and tries to slipstream Charles Leclerc, who also comes across to the other side of the racetrack. Charles Leclerc then gets a little bit caught up, almost gets caught out by George Russell. Everyone filters in quite nicely. Lewis Hamilton with Quite a poor start. He's under pressure from Fernando Alonso, and then Fernando Alonso loses out, and Hulkenberg jumps through. Here's Pierre Gasly's perspective. Right behind Logan Sargent, and kind of watches everyone else filter through. And he bangs wheels with Esteban Ocon. Oh my goodness me. Can the Alpines just have a race where they don't collide with one another? Max Verstappen, fastest lap that time around, then closes that gap as the DRS is now enabled. We've completed 3 laps and head into lap 4 of the Grand Prix. And you can see Max Verstappen's just closing in now that DRS is enabled. Sergio Perez a little bit stuck behind George Russell right now in 5th place though. 0.7 seconds behind George Russell. Will hopefully be able to push on for the Red Bull team and get in front. Alex Albon's just dropped off the back of Sergio Perez though. 1.5 seconds now the gap. Piastri also 1.1 seconds off Albon. So the next car with DRS is Lando Norris. And I don't know how much the McLarens are going to be allowed to battle one another. I'm sure Zach Brown will be on the radio asking them to be nice to one another. Max Verstappen, he's already sliding a little bit, so he's monitoring Carlos Sainz's tyres and times, and clearly Carlos Sainz already struggling a little bit on those medium compound tyres, so Max Verstappen just biding his time by the sounds of things. So threatening, isn't it? Just the fact that he knows he can wait a few laps if needs be. Holding on to the back of the Ferrari. Knowing that the Ferrari is not the best on its tyres in comparison to the Red Bull. Max Verstappen just marginally quicker last lap, but by 100th of a second or so. Leclerc obviously also within contention though, up there battling with those two. Needs to give Charles Leclerc as much of a chance of keeping up with these two as possible so that Ferrari do have 2 cars. Maybe they can go slightly different with their strategies and try and keep both of the Ferraris in contention for the race victory, as Carlos Sainz under pressure from Max Verstappen now. 0.3, 0.4 of a second between them. And we're on board with Max Verstappen. He's around 30 meters behind Carlos Sainz, and that is going to close and close as the DRS is wide open on the Red Bull car. Is Max Verstappen going to have a go this time around? Looking to have a look at the Ferrari. Goes up the inside. Is there contact? But Carlos Sainz runs him out of road, and Max Verstappen has to wait. It's given a lot of time, though, to Charles Leclerc, and Sainz doing a really good job, actually, of keeping Leclerc within DRS of Max Verstappen. They have to work together, these two Ferraris, so they're going to come away with anything this afternoon. Max Verstappen a little on board, goes to the left-hand side of the track, obviously on the outside for turn 1, but then the inside of turn 2. And Carlos Sainz just sticks to the racing line, is more than happy that his Ferrari is still ahead of the Red Bull. And it closes the gap on Verstappen. Verstappen on the radio, not super happy with it. Says it's a little bit of a naughty move from Carlos Sainz, but I think the Ferrari was ahead of the Red Bull for the entirety there. Carlos Sainz will argue that he just stayed on the racing line there, and I think he did. Sainz on the radio gets the confirmation from his team. Good move. Holding Max Verstappen behind, allowing Charles Leclerc that little bit of time just to catch up. Charles Leclerc now does have DRS this time around. Max Verstappen too. But I think Max Verstappen will just bide his energy a little bit. recharge those batteries once again. And Charles Leclerc now jumping miles ahead of George Russell, actually. A second and a half to George Russell. Sergio Perez also then trying to get past George Russell, but not able to right now. We can look at it in a little bit more detail. If we see the gap to the leader now, you can see George Russell just 3 seconds off the lead, Carlos Sainz already, but then jumping back to Albon, you've got another 6 seconds off of the race leader is Alex Albon. Both within DRS now. Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc, their rear wings wide open. The DRS not as effective as normal, though. Obviously, the rear wings here incredibly skinny. But we'll be charging the battery. And we'll be staring at the back of that Ferrari. And thinking about having another go down towards turn 1. Will it be this time? Or will Max Verstappen have another lap just to prepare his Red Bull for the attack? It's not quite as close as he was on the lap where he did go for the attack, so I think he's going to sit behind the Ferrari once again going into turn 1. Does indeed. And Sergio Perez having a little look at George Russell and not quite able to do it this time around. The Mercedes car putting on the defensive maneuvers. Sergio Perez 0.3 of a second behind George Russell, right underneath the rear wing of the Mercedes car, but not able to have a go down into the chicane either as they start the second sector of the lap. Is DRS at the end of this second sector for Sergio Perez if he wants to have a go there? Actually gets a little bit out of shape, does Sergio Perez, and even with DRS down towards the third sector, is going to struggle to keep in touching distance with George Russell. So now, again, half a second between Sergio Perez and George Russell. Actually, George Russell holding on to Carlos Sainz fairly well. 3 seconds, still the gap between fourth and first. But still under pressure from Sergio Perez. And now Max Verstappen looks a lot closer this time around. I think this is going to be the lap where he does go on the attack once again. So has clearly saved up enough of a battery again around that 30-meter mark between the Red Bull and the Ferrari. Closing and closing every single second. And Carlos Sainz is going to come to the inside on the defensive. And Max Verstappen, I think, is just going to hold behind the Carlos Sainz Ferrari. And maybe is going to have a little go down towards this second chicane instead. Because Max Verstappen didn't really get up alongside the Ferrari like we've seen before. Turn 6, more management needed for George Russell. But as Russell says, he's got Sergio Perez right underneath him. So can't really do too much. George Russell racing rather than wanting to hold on to his tyres. Our top 10 then: Sainz, Verstappen, Leclerc, Russell, Perez, Albon, Piastri, Norris, Hamilton and Alonso in the points once again. Nico Hülkenberg has just dropped back to 11th place. Liam Lawson holding on to 12th in the lone AlphaTauri. Logan Sargent in 13th. And Carlos Sainz still keeping himself outside the range of Max Verstappen. Max Verstappen given some engine modes to go into. Mode 8, they're saying. But Max Verstappen on the radio frustrated. They've got so much top speed, the Ferraris. And Sainz struggling with the rear tyres, according to Christian Horner. So Max Verstappen just needs to bide his time a little bit here. Just needs to be maybe a touch more patient than he'd like to be. We know Max Verstappen hasn't been the most patient of Formula 1 drivers in the world. He likes to get his moves done early. That's boded well for him over the course of this season. He's been able to make up a lot of positions very quickly. But now is maybe getting a little bit tired of seeing the back of that Ferrari car as Carlos Sainz in the mirrors. We'll see Max Verstappen closing the gap once again on lap 10 of this Grand Prix. Is Max Verstappen going to have a little fight down towards turn 1 this time around? As we start lap 11 of the Grand Prix, around about half a second between Sainz and Verstappen then. The DRS comes open for Max Verstappen. Charles Leclerc, I don't think is within DRS range. Sergio Perez looking at the back of George Russell, and Sergio Perez this time around, is he going to be able to have a go? George Russell brakes incredibly late though, and keeps the position ahead of Sergio Perez, closes the door on the Mexican, and holds on to 4th place. George Russell doing everything in his power to hold on to the back of Charles Leclerc and try and keep himself in 4th place, but dropping off the back of the leader just a little bit. The Alpine of Pierre Gasly comes into the pits, incredibly hot brakes, and a really slow stop from Pierre Gasly by the looks of things as well. 5.9 second stop for the Alpine. Clearly going for some sort of different strategy to everybody else. Maybe going very, very long on these hard compound tyres is Pierre Gasly, giving himself some clean air. And we'll see what the Alpine can do at the back of the pack. Keep an eye on his lap times. Now 48 seconds, though, off Carlos Sainz at the front. Yuki Tsunoda, obviously the sole driver out of this race. 19 drivers still involved. And Gasly is the one I'm interested in. His lap times on the hard compound tyres. Although let's keep our eyes on Max Verstappen too, as Max Verstappen has a look at Carlos Sainz once again and still isn't able to do it. Sergio Perez also looking at George Russell once again. But once again, George Russell just keeping that Mercedes in the way. Zhou Guanyu also comes into the pits for the Alfa Romeo team. So I think Zhou Guanyu is trying to cover off Pierre Gasly in one way or another. Obviously a very slow stop for Pierre as well. So Zhou should come out fairly comfortably in front of that Alpine if nothing goes wrong. Feel like, yeah, Verstappen is very shark-like today, isn't it? It's just kind of waiting, watching, getting that opportunity running. Oh, and the jack was stuck on the Alpine by the looks of things. Just couldn't get the jack underneath the front wing. Nico Hülkenberg in the Haas. Not really too much of a defense to Fernando Alonso. And Nico Hülkenberg struggling on his tyres actually has dropped behind Liam Lawson as well. The Haas car just completely shreds through any compound of tyre that they use, don't they? Max Verstappen deploying a bit more battery. And Verstappen holding this time around, not going for the move. And Sergio Perez also just not going for the move this time around on George Russell. We've seen Sergio Perez all over the back of Max Verstappen, of George Russell in the last couple of laps. Russell on the radio. Undercut will be very powerful, George Russell thinks. So George Russell wants to go for an undercut by the sounds of things on the radio. Obviously, he needs that gap, though. If we look, George Russell 5 seconds off the lead. So around a 20-second stop. Needs about 20 seconds. If we look 20 seconds off of George Russell, if he were to pit now, he would still come out around about Stroll and at the back of the pack. So maybe needs to just hold out for a little bit of a gap in the traffic. Everybody's kind of found their positions, though, and is fairly comfortable at sitting where they are. I mean, Alex Albon now 5 seconds off of Sergio Perez. So this top 5 very much in the battle all on their own. Maybe Alex Albon just holding onto his tyres a little bit and waiting in the wings for a possible charge with the Williams later on in the Grand Prix. But 6th place, I think he'll be very happy with. His best result of the season. Max Verstappen still looking at Carlos Sainz. And still not able to really do too much. Sergio Perez is going to go for the move. Oh! And both Perez and Russell don't make turn 1. They both use the escape road, and Sergio Perez came out on top. AlphaTauri also pit Liam Lawson from 11th place, he was. And George Russell has been let back through by Sergio Perez, so neither of them making that turn 1. Although Sergio Perez saying that he was pushed off by George Russell. This battle between those two is going to go on and on and on, isn't it? Sergio Perez all over the back of the Mercedes. Let's have a look at the onboard. Sergio Perez does actually get ahead. But yeah, outbreaks himself and does not get anywhere near turn 1, unfortunately for the Mexican. Yeah, neither of them anywhere close to going over the corner as they should. And yeah, Sergio Perez, not really too much of an argument he could have there. Both of them just went super deep into the corner. Max Verstappen actually looks closer than he has been over the last few laps on the back of the Red Bull. The Ferrari maybe chunking through its medium compound tyres. Max Verstappen looks at it. Oh, and Carlos Sainz. It's a big lock-up in the Ferrari. Is that going to open the door to Max Verstappen, especially coming around turn 3? I think it is. Carlos Sainz now under pressure from Verstappen. Verstappen is going to push him all the way to the outside. And Verstappen is going to get it down into the inside towards turn 4, sorry. And Verstappen takes the lead of the Grand Prix. That lock-up for Carlos Sainz just gives Max Verstappen enough of a gap. And they went all the way around turn 3 together, side by side. And Max Verstappen makes it count. Just waited, kept the pressure on Carlos Sainz. And that lock-up from the Ferrari has now let Max Verstappen escape into the lead of this Grand Prix then. The Ferrari garage look on in frustration. Max Verstappen has now been unleashed though. Can he get away from the Ferrari pair and make this 10 victories from 10? Lando Norris on the radio. Oscar needs to pick up the pace. Lando Norris frustrated behind Oscar. Wants to push on, and they haven't switched them around as of yet. Maybe Piastri just not able to get past Albon. And Lando wants to have a little go as Sergio Perez is now going to have a look at George Russell once again. Goes up the inside of turn 1. Does make turn 1 and turn 2 this time around. And Sergio Perez now making the move as well. Alex Albon has come into the pits for the Williams team. So Piastri is now going to be unleashed, and we'll see if Piastri's pace is better than Lando Norris's. But Sergio Perez is now also on the stomp for Red Bull, because George Russell is not going to be able to get past that Red Bull as they go down towards turn 4. That is going to mean that Charles Leclerc has a 3.5 second gap to Sergio Perez. And I'm sure Sergio Perez is going to do everything in his power to close that as quickly as possible and start to help out his teammate. We see Carlos Sainz side by side with Verstappen. Carlos Sainz carrying enough speed down towards turn 4. Tries to hold on to it, but Max Verstappen up the inside. Squeezes Carlos Sainz and pushes him away from it. The gap to the leader now 1.5 seconds. So Max Verstappen has indeed been unleashed in this Grand Prix. And Carlos Sainz not able to do anything at all now that Max Verstappen has disappeared up the road by 1.5 seconds. Charles Leclerc is now looking at the back of his teammate. And I don't know if the Ferraris will really want these two battling with one another for very long. Max Verstappen, fastest lap of the Grand Prix. And now 2 seconds ahead of Carlos Sainz. Carlos Sainz maybe will try and pit now, go for that undercut that George Russell was talking about, but the problem is like pitting from this point. So where would he come out? 22 seconds or so. He'd come around, he'd come out Alonso-ish, behind Alonso. Carlos Sainz would have to find some pace behind Fernando Alonso. Obviously, he'd hopefully come out in front of Valtteri Bottas, as they're just saying. Charles Leclerc the same. Interesting how Ferrari will deal with this then, as Charles Leclerc now behind Carlos Sainz. And Charles Leclerc on the radio. Carlos is struggling a little bit with the rears. So Sainz trying to keep Verstappen behind, has maybe just gone through those medium compound tyres a little bit quicker than he'd have hoped. Sergio Perez on that last lap was 0.6 of a second than Charles Leclerc. So Sergio Perez getting through. Carlos Sainz tyres are nearly finished. So Carlos Sainz now looking to try and come in, I'd imagine. Where would Carlos Sainz come in? It's Alonso and Bottas, isn't it? Whether he'd come out behind Alonso or whether he'd come out behind Bottas is the tricky gap that Ferrari have got to try and manage and measure. Lewis Hamilton in 8th place. The McLaren team coming out and preparing for a pit stop. Alex Albon is doing 27 dead, yeah. So Albon absolutely flying along. Obviously pitted from 6th place, did Alex Albon. And the McLarens will maybe be a little bit worried about the pace that Albon is showing. Trying to hold on, obviously overtake that Williams if they can this weekend, especially with Lewis Hamilton now bearing down on the McLaren cars as well. Hamilton on the harder compound of tyre, so will go from hard to medium, you'd imagine. So will also be on the softer, quicker tyre later on in the Grand Prix. Lewis Hamilton will definitely be fighting with these McLarens towards the end, you'd imagine. Max Verstappen now just elongating his lead once again, nearly 5 seconds ahead of Carlos Sainz. It is just silly at this point, isn't it? Max Verstappen absolutely flying along, and Carlos Sainz box is the call. And they will be hoping that he comes out behind Fernando Alonso. So let's see then. Need a good pit stop here from the Ferrari team. It's not vintage. 3.3 seconds stop. Especially considering George Russell's stop only 2.6 seconds just behind. The Red Bull garage preparing some tyres as well. So let's see where Sainz comes out. No, it's behind Valtteri Bottas. Carlos Sainz comes out behind Bottas, and that is going to be a horror show unless Valtteri Bottas pits soon. But Bottas on the hard tyre. No, that's really bad for Carlos Sainz. That is really bad for Carlos Sainz. Outlap critical, George Russell is told. So George Russell being told to push on the outlap. Verstappen. Box. I think they're double stacking, yeah. Charles Leclerc also boxing, so everybody coming in now and covering one another off. No, Sergio Perez goes. So Sergio Perez carries on. Verstappen in and out, and there is Charles Leclerc just behind. In and out for Charles Leclerc too. A 2.5 second stop for Verstappen. 2.3 second stop for Charles Leclerc. Carlos Sainz is the one to keep an eye on. Luckily, Carlos Sainz has gotten ahead of Valtteri Bottas, but is he going to have enough? Carlos Sainz now coming down the pit straight, and it looks like Charles Leclerc is going to get out just ahead. No! Carlos Sainz is going to be literally millimeters ahead of his teammate, and Carlos Sainz holds on to the lead over his teammate. So Verstappen, Sainz, Leclerc 6th, 7th and 8th now as they've all come into the pits. Sergio Perez has been released in that Red Bull. But now Charles Leclerc is going to have a little look at Carlos Sainz towards turn 4. And no, this time around, the gap is closed. And this is the battle for the podium, really, isn't it? Between Sainz and Leclerc. And Leclerc will want that podium in front of the Ferrari fans. Max Verstappen still 5.5 seconds ahead of Carlos Sainz, though, and has pitted onto the hard compound tyre. So the guys on the mediums, this is Sergio Perez coming in then. So Sergio Perez only had one lap there to really try and push himself. He'll want to come out in and around the Ferraris too. Ferrari's coming around the final corner. Sergio Perez just coming to the end of the pit lane. It's going to be pretty nip and tuck again. There's Sainz and Leclerc just ahead, but Sergio Perez is within touching distance of both Ferraris now, which is a really good stop from the Red Bull team. They got him right in and amongst it with the Ferraris. Verstappen, Sainz, Leclerc, Perez still our top 4 in and amongst Piastri, Norris and Hamilton, who have yet to have stopped. You can see everybody else has stopped. Valtteri Bottas, Esteban Ocon, the other 2 to have not stopped. So Piastri, Norris, Hamilton, Bottas and Ocon will be stopping at some point. But then Max Verstappen leading the race technically. Lewis Hamilton, though, will lead for a little while. You'd imagine the McLarens will come in on the mediums, and Hamilton going longer on the hard compound tyre will take the lead of the Grand Prix, if only for a little while. Tell you what they could do with a safety car would really mix this up as Lando Norris decides to come into the pits and possibly try and undercut Oscar Piastri. Lando Norris was on the radio earlier complaining about the pace of his teammate. Let's see what Lando can do with a fresh set of hard compound tyres on his car then. Carlos Sainz sets the fastest lap of the Grand Prix on a fresh set of hard compound tyres. Still under pressure though from Charles Leclerc. He's about half a second off of his teammate. Sergio Perez hunting down just behind as well. George Russell unfortunately kind of out of this battle now. Did really well to hold off Perez for a little while, but Russell in the Mercedes nowhere near the pace of the Ferraris and Red Bulls this weekend. He sits in 7th place. Under investigation, leaving the track and gaining an advantage, George Russell and Esteban Ocon. Interesting. Let's have a look. George Russell coming out of the pits then. Ocon around the outside. Oh, yeah. George Russell just did not make turn 1 and goes straight on. And Ocon actually does make his way around the turn. So George Russell may have gained a little bit of an advantage there as Oscar Piastri comes into the pits. Be interesting to see if Oscar comes out in front of Lando then. Because Norris was trying to do a little bit of an undercut on his teammate. Had quite a little bit of clean air, did Lando Norris, for his outlap. The outlap would have been incredibly critical. Ocon comes past. Where is Lando Norris? And Lando Norris does get past right beside his teammate. Almost come to a touch, the two McLarens. And Norris is just ahead of Piastri. That was down to tenths of a second. Had to get a little bit defensive. And that is a penalty for George Russell. 5 seconds, gaining an advantage by leaving the track. So George Russell with a 5-second penalty added to him. So unless he stops again, that'll just be added to his final lap time. Ooh. And Lando and Piastri coming very close to hitting with one another. Max Verstappen looking at the back of Lewis Hamilton. Hamilton now leading after both of the McLarens have pitted. Obviously, Hamilton's tyres a lot older than Max Verstappen's hard compound tyres. I don't think Lewis will put up too much of a fight in that. Max Verstappen takes the lead of the Grand Prix from Lewis Hamilton, and long before we even get to turn 1. Perez all over the back of the two Ferraris. Carlos Sainz lapping quicker than Max Verstappen, actually. But 4 seconds still the gap to Max Verstappen. And unfortunately now Max does have clean air. Lewis Hamilton will have to come in and change those hard compound tyres, though. So if Sainz can continue to chunk away the time from Verstappen, maybe get himself to within a second and start to have a little bit of a tussle. So we've seen everybody pit now, apart from Hamilton and Bottas. So they're the two outliers right now, but Hamilton ahead of Carlos Sainz by 3 seconds. Where will Hamilton come out? So if he comes out, it'll be around about Alonso still. So it'll be near Norris, Piastri, Alonso will Lewis Hamilton, but will be on fresher tyres. Of course, if there's a safety car or something along those lines, then maybe that'll play into Lewis Hamilton's hands just a little bit. Ooh, Sergio Perez. Nope, not this time on Charles Leclerc. And Valtteri Bottas, the penultimate driver to pit. So just Lewis Hamilton to go then. And Albon will jump back in front. So will Norris, Piastri, Alonso, Lawson up into 11th place. Joe in 12th, Sargent 13th. Let's see then, Oscar Piastri coming out of the pits. A replay of that overtake from Lando Norris. Lando is up alongside. Oh, and there is a collision. They do touch. Ooh. And Oscar's front left, Lando's rear right do come to blows with one another. A little bit of a rub between those tyres, and the onboard looked a lot harder than the off-board camera shot. I didn't even notice there was contact between them until seeing that onboard. A hefty whack on both of the McLaren cars caused by one another. Sergio Perez still just bearing down. Carlos Sainz has closed that gap to Lewis Hamilton a little bit quicker than I thought he was going to, actually. And now Carlos Sainz kind of stuck behind Lewis Hamilton, which isn't going to help him in the battle with Max Verstappen. Not that there was too much of a battle with Max Verstappen to look forward to. Don't know if Hamilton will put up too much of a fight behind Carlos Sainz, but will cost Carlos Sainz a little bit of time on this lap. And there we are. Carlos Sainz gets ahead, going down towards turn 11. No further investigation on that collision between Piastri and Norris. Both of them have continued on. And Norris in 8th ahead of Piastri. The two teammates still right together though, as Perez gets in front of Hamilton as well, because Hamilton has come into the pit. So the final driver that needed to pit has come in. And now Mercedes are hoping that this Lewis Hamilton car is going to be an absolute rocket ship on the medium compound tyre until the end of the race. It's going to have much fresher, faster tyres. There's Fernando Alonso, though, and Lewis Hamilton probably didn't want to lose a position to Fernando, but has. Alonso goes up into 9th place, so that's going to be an interesting battle between those two, to see whether Hamilton can get back in front of the Aston Martin. Liam Lawson right there in 11th place as well, by the way. That would mean that he takes 20th in the Drivers' Championship. He'd jump ahead of Nick de Vries. But he could get a point here, Liam Lawson. Just needs something to go wrong for somebody in the top 10. Unfortunately, it's a very competitive top 10 at this moment in time. Maybe Alonso and Hamilton come to blows with one another. Something along those lines. Hamilton on the radio. There's a long way to go on this tyre. So Hamilton may be a bit concerned that they came in a touch early. Maybe Hamilton not so happy with the earlier stop there. But his tyres are a little bit, or what, 9 laps? Yeah, 9 laps younger, Lewis Hamilton's tyres. Underwhelming with no championship battle. It's definitely been underwhelming in terms of the championship. Oh, as Lewis Hamilton has a go on Fernando Alonso. Much fresher medium compound tyres on the Mercedes and gets it done. Alonso, not too much he could do there, unfortunately. Lewis Hamilton takes the 9th place back from the Aston Martin. And now is going to be hunting down the McLarens. I thought Lewis Hamilton would come out in and around the McLarens and be able to battle with them towards the end of the Grand Prix. Might be able to battle with them a little bit earlier. Alex Albon, the McLaren driver, is being told that the Williams is catchable, and he certainly is. Lando Norris now 0.4 of a second behind Alex Albon, and the McLarens, they've swapped around, but they're right on the back of the Williams once again, and Sergio Perez trying to get past Charles Leclerc and just can't do it this time around. Yeah, Ferrari done a really good job so far. Done very good indeed. Lando Norris then is going to have a little go at Alex Albon. Alex Albon goes to the corners and down towards turn 1. Lando Norris not this time around, but Alex Albon's going to be under a lot of pressure from these McLarens. Just looking so much quicker than the Williams now. And probably looking at a 2-stop strategy, Alex Albon. Came in quite early for those tyres. 6 laps between Albon and Lando's tyres. Oh, and Lando with a little bit of a lock-up as well. Verstappen, Sainz, Leclerc still our top 3. Sergio Perez trying to change that, though. He wants to go home with a trophy for the Red Bull team today as he looks at the back of Charles Leclerc once again. and is right underneath Charles Leclerc. Leclerc without DRS. Sergio Perez is going to have a little go around the outside of turn 1. No, not this time around. Charles Leclerc brakes later and gets to the apex of turn 1 just that little bit quicker, although a little bit shaky through the exit of 2. And now Sergio Perez is going to have good traction around turn 3, right behind the Ferrari. He's going to come up again to the outside of turn 4. Oh, and he's onto the dust. And got onto the dust and grass there, Sergio Perez, and desperately trying to get past Charles Leclerc. Sergio Perez, unfortunately, for the Red Bull team, stays behind. Oh, he tries to go for a gap, but the right rear tyre into the grass, and the Red Bull mechanics, they lean forward, willing the Red Bull car to stay on the track, and it did. Sergio Perez managed to catch it and is now pushing on. Sergio Perez. Leclerc not giving any space. And Sergio Perez giving the go-ahead. You're faster. Give it a go. Get ahead of him. Charles Leclerc, a second and a half off of his teammate, is not going to have DRS once again. Sergio Perez is. And Perez is going to go all the way around. Charles Leclerc is going to try and have the inside line towards turn 1. And does. Charles Leclerc not able to fend off Sergio Perez that time around. And Sergio Perez takes 3rd place. And now he's going to hunt down the other Ferrari. A couple of seconds, the gap between Perez and Sainz. Hello, Regan. How are we doing? Just had to wait until Charles Leclerc didn't have that DRS, didn't he? Charles Leclerc without the DRS. Nowhere in terms of the pace to the Red Bull of Sergio Perez. Lando Norris still behind Alex Albon. Haven't seen an overtake yet from the McLaren. And Albon just holding enough of a gap over the McLarens right now to keep himself up in 6th place. Lewis Hamilton's an interesting one because he's obviously on the medium compound tyre and should be pushing towards. Carlos Sainz struggling already on these hard compound tyres, saying that it might be tricky to get to the end on these hards. Maybe we will see a few drivers go for a 2-stop strategy instead. Give anything for Bottas bowling. A safety car wouldn't change too much at this point, because everybody's stopped once. James Vowles there, watching on as Alex Albon holding on to 6th place. Would be his best finish of the season, Alex Albon. Obviously got a 7th place in Canada. And Norris, actually just a couple attempts slower than Alex Albon in the last couple of laps. Maybe just getting a bit more battery ready to go. And Max Verstappen sets the fastest lap of the Grand Prix at 1:25.2. Sainz now 7 seconds off the race leader. Sergio Perez still 2 seconds behind Carlos Sainz. So not catching up to the back of the Ferrari insanely quickly. Charles Leclerc has dropped off Sergio Perez a touch, sort of half a second. Russell all by himself, actually. Russell in 5th place, 6 seconds between Leclerc and Russell, and then a 14-second gap between Russell and Albon. Albon already 30 seconds off the lead of the Grand Prix as Esteban Ocon fighting with Kevin Magnussen. Ocon around the outside of turn 1, inside of the Haas at turn 2, and makes the position stick. And here we go, then we are seeing a few drivers going for the 2-stop strategy. Liam Lawson comes into the pits. Zhou Guanyu into the pits too. Gasly also onto the medium compound tyres they go with a second stop in this race. So now Liam Lawson, they're hoping, unleashed. Odds of max engine self-destructing. I mean, we've seen one Red Bull powertrain that has destructed itself today. Maybe we see a second Red Bull powertrain go wrong. It's happened before. We've seen a couple of powertrains from the same team go wrong at a race. Definitely could happen. But I think you have to start praying fairly soon. Albon on the radio. McLaren starting to struggle managing them nicely. So Albon given the thumbs up from the team. And Lando Norris, to be fair, hasn't looked as quick. Hasn't got the top speed advantage and therefore hasn't got that ability to really push on and try and get past that Williams car. Lando Norris on the radio. Told that Alex Albon is struggling quite a lot, and Lando on the radio says, yep, I can see that he's struggling. I'm going to try and give it my best shot. But Lando Norris still behind Alex Albon at this point. Be interesting to see how the 2 stoppers are getting on once Liam Lawson kind of does a lap. And Bradley Lord on the pit wall for Mercedes, just saying that they're looking at Lewis Hamilton's times and hoping that they can just about manage that medium tyre up to the point where they can catch onto the back of Alex Albon. So they're looking about 0.5 of a second quicker last lap. So Hamilton now 3.5 seconds off the back of Piastri, hoping that they can sort of close that gap and then have the tyre advantage when it comes to the final few laps of the Grand Prix and try and push through. Alex Albon 15 seconds off George Russell as well. Verstappen has now an 8-second gap over Carlos Sainz. Then Sergio Perez has closed it down a little bit. Was a couple of seconds behind Sainz. Now 1.5 seconds. Closing in very, very slowly towards the back of Carlos Sainz. Just sort of 3 or 4 tenths every lap. Lewis Hamilton. Hamilton really not sure about these medium tyres as Lewis Hamilton. Medium compound tyre on Hamilton's car. Where is he? 2.7 seconds off Piastri now. He just doesn't seem confident, does Lewis Hamilton. I think he should be a little bit more confident. He's lapping much quicker than the guys in front. So 3/4 tenths a lap, closing that gap down fairly swiftly. You can see Lewis Hamilton in the background there behind Oscar Piastri as they come down the back straight with Albon, then Norris and Piastri, with Lewis Hamilton just behind. And if he can catch up to this group of 3, maybe carve his way through. 6th place finish for Lewis Hamilton could be on the cards if played perfectly. Again, Albon goes to the inside of the corner, and Lando Norris pushed halfway through the chicane, through the escape road, is going to have to let Alex Albon back through. And Albon is going to have to survive for one more lap once again. And Albon holds on to 6th place for now. Lance Stroll making some moves up as well. Nico Hülkenberg dropping back behind the Aston Martin. So Lance Stroll up into 13th place now. Think people might put soft tyres on later on in the race. I thought we might see some hard compound tyre users go hard onto soft. But Lewis Hamilton couldn't make the hards last long enough. So had to go hard onto medium. We've seen a few guys towards the back. Liam Lawson, you can see kind of at the front of that pack that have gone for a second stop. And they've chucked on a second set of mediums as well. So don't know if we'll see a soft compound tyre. You'd have to get yourself right in the perfect little window to get the soft compound tyre on at the end. Alex Albon under a little bit less pressure this time around has helped Lewis Hamilton out quite a bit, actually. The battle between Albon and Norris at turn 1 as Lewis Hamilton now closes that gap to within a second. And he's going to be right on the back of Oscar Piastri fairly swiftly on the fresher medium tyre, around 9 laps fresher, and of course a compound softer Lewis Hamilton. Norris on the radio. Box to overtake. So Norris going for it then. There you go. There's your answer, Adam. We're going to see some guys. A second little box. Carlos Sainz finally has been caught up by Sergio Perez. Taking a little bit longer than I thought the Red Bull would have taken. Especially as there is now a Haas that they have to contend with. Kevin Magnussen gets out of the way of Sainz, Perez and Leclerc. All 3 of them come past the Ferrari-powered white car. Oh, it was a little dummy. Little dummy pit stop from Lando Norris there. Oh, Lewis Hamilton. Right up beside Oscar Piastri already. And Piastri closes the door. Both cars go off the road at turn 5. Oscar Piastri right under pressure from Lewis Hamilton already then. I didn't even realise that Lewis Hamilton made up almost a second on that last lap. Really swift lap from the Mercedes. And he looks a lot quicker as Lewis Hamilton. 6th place definitely up for grabs with 11 laps left to go. Sergio Perez now, as I said, right on the back of Carlos Sainz. And Sainz is going to be on the defensive once again. This time from the other Red Bull. Did so well to keep Max Verstappen behind at the beginning of the Grand Prix. Now has Sergio Perez behind at the end of the Grand Prix for Carlos Sainz. Really tricky weekend for him. Looking at Sainz come out ahead of Albon. I mean, yeah, he would come out ahead of Albon, right? 24 seconds the gap. But then would he be able to get back in front of Russell, Leclerc and Perez is the thing, right? You'd have to hope that some of those guys are going to pit too. Lewis Hamilton still right behind Oscar Piastri. And Piastri doing everything that he possibly can to keep him behind. But Lewis Hamilton's going to have much better traction off the chicane. Is he going to have the better run down towards turn 4? Piastri's going to try and hold off the 7-time world champion. It's rookie versus Hamilton, and they've collided. There's contact there between the two of them. Oscar Piastri, for me, that's the second time this race he's come into contact with somebody, and maybe just doesn't quite have the panache when it comes to the wheel-to-wheel racing. Lewis Hamilton comes out ahead. That's some damage to Oscar Piastri's front wing. Is there any damage to Lewis Hamilton's car? We'll yet to see. But Oscar Piastri and Lewis Hamilton come together. Now Sergio Perez and Carlos Sainz. Are they going to come together too as they get down towards turn 1? No. But this is where it is. Sergio Perez is going to get a better run off turn 2. Round turn 3 they go. And Sergio Perez looking again at the back of the Ferrari, but not able to make it happen this time around. Lewis Hamilton now a couple of seconds off the back of Lando Norris, and Oscar Piastri into the pits. And that's probably a couple of points thrown away there by Oscar Piastri, as the front wing definitely needs changing. Almost the entire left-hand side of that front wing hanging off completely. And the new front wing goes on, but the points are gone now for Oscar Piastri. Let's see then. Ooh. I don't know about that one. I don't know if Oscar could have gone any further left, honestly. I think that might be a Lewis Hamilton problem, or a Lewis Hamilton fault there. It just looks like Hamilton goes right and kind of tries to push Oscar further right, but there isn't any more road for him to go to. So he holds his line, and then Hamilton kind of sweeps across the front of him. So I'll hold back my statement. And Sergio Perez, onto the escape road. But so Charles Leclerc can't pounce, and Sergio Perez holds on to third place, even though he has to go all the way down the escape road. Sergio Perez. Carlos Sainz moving really late on braking. Incident involving Piastri and Hamilton under investigation, causing a collision. So we might see another Mercedes with a penalty. We've got George Russell with a 5-second penalty, but he's 20 seconds ahead of Alex Albon, so that's not going to matter at all. Lewis Hamilton, if he picks up a 5-second penalty, opens the door to Fernando Alonso, who's only 4 seconds behind. And Valtteri Bottas is now the driver that is in the point scoring positions for Alfa Romeo, out of absolutely nowhere. Liam Lawson closing in. He was obviously the first driver to do a 2-stop strategy, and Liam Lawson 13th place. Unfortunately, I think Liam Lawson's now going to be under pressure from Oscar Piastri, which is going to probably cost him a bit of time and maybe put him out of contention for the points. Perez on the radio being told Sainz did the same to Max. Sargent points? I don't think so. I think he's on later tyres. Yeah, Valtteri Bottas, much fresher medium compound tyres compared to Sargent. I think Sargent might have to pit again. A little bit late for a second pit stop though, isn't it? So Sargent on the periphery of points is Logan Sargent, but not quite points today. Unless somebody decides to come together. Lewis Hamilton penalty is indeed another 5-second penalty for the Mercedes team. So both Russell and Hamilton with 5-second penalties. That means Hamilton will lose a position right now to Fernando Alonso, although another big gap to Valtteri Bottas of 17 seconds between Alonso and Bottas. So Hamilton now just trying to push ahead and try and get himself. And Hamilton now actually looking at the back of Norris and Albon. Sergio Perez trying to get past Carlos Sainz once again. He's going to try and get around the outside of turn 1 and get the inside line, and Carlos Sainz once again closes the gap, and Sergio Perez has to go down the escape road once again behind the Ferrari. And Sainz given the position back by Sergio Perez again. It just feels like the space just completely closes on Sergio Perez every single time around. Lewis Hamilton, though, is going to have a go on Lando Norris. Same kind of thing again. He's on the outside of turn 1. He's a little bit further ahead, though, and Lewis Hamilton's going to make that stick. And Hamilton takes 7th place from Lando Norris and is now bearing down on Alex Albon. Remember, though, has a 5-second penalty. So if he does get in front, needs to then also get himself in there. Liam Lawson has just gone past Lance Stroll up into 12th place. Oscar Piastri also trying to get past Lance Stroll too. And Sergio Perez getting very, very annoyed and angry behind Carlos Sainz now. Sainz really not leaving the Mexican any kind of space. Sergio Perez even closer to Carlos Sainz than he was last lap. DRS wide open again. Sergio Perez, the toe down towards turn 1, is going to have a go. And is ahead of the Ferrari. And he's going to have the inside line at turn 1 this time. And Sergio Perez finally gets the move done. He's been trying over and over and over again. And Sainz finally folds with Sergio Perez taking 2nd place. We have Verstappen, Perez, our top 2. And Carlos Sainz now the final podium finisher. Charles Leclerc, though, will smell blood. Lewis Hamilton right underneath Alex Albon. Hamilton fighting down the braking zone towards turn 1. Decides to get the better run out of turn 2. Maybe he's going to try and have an overtake at turn 4. Lewis Hamilton went very, very early on the brakes there. And a little bit of a drag race between the two down towards turn 4. Lewis Hamilton closing that gap. Albon closes off the gap a little bit quicker, though. And seems to be finding a little bit of a groove. Sargent is an interesting one, though, because he's now under pressure from Liam Lawson. Lawson 1.4 seconds quicker than Sargent last lap. So if Lawson can get this right, he might finish up 11th place here. 5 laps left to go. And a 5-second, nearly 6-second gap between Lawson and Sargent. Charles Leclerc is going to have a go on Carlos Sainz. And locks up. And is he going to have a go? Carlos Sainz tries to come back at Charles Leclerc. They're going to go right down to turn 3 and 4 together. Carlos Sainz right beside Charles Leclerc. The two Ferraris side by side down towards turn 4. I hope this doesn't get messy between the two of them into the braking zone. A big lock-up from Carlos Sainz. Doesn't make the corner. Neither of them do. Sainz is back ahead of Leclerc, and that nearly ended in some Ferrari tears. Hamilton looking at Albon again, and Hamilton has got in front of Albon this time around. So now Hamilton, with a drag race of his own, needs to get 5 seconds ahead. So Albon needs to remain 5 seconds behind Lewis Hamilton in the next 5 laps. And Lewis Hamilton will drop back behind them once again. But the Mercedes car has looked very good, actually. And had Lewis Hamilton not picked up that 5-second penalty, was on for 6th place fairly comfortably, I think. Actually, I think Lewis Hamilton is going to get more than 5 seconds ahead of Albon. Already a 1.5 seconds ahead of Albon after just a few corners. And Hamilton on the medium compound tyre just looking a lot quicker. Charles Leclerc is going to have a go at Carlos Sainz once again. Down towards turn 1. Sainz closes the gap at turn 1 and Leclerc has to go really deep. Fighting in turn 2. The Ferraris are going absolutely all in on one another right now. And the Italian fans are going to be wincing at the sight of Charles Leclerc trying to run up the inside of Carlos Sainz. And Sainz closing the door on the Monash teammate. Keeping an eye on Liam Lawson here. 4 seconds off Logan Sargent now. Another second and a half quicker than the Williams last lap was Liam Lawson. I really hope that Liam Lawson can get an 11th place finish, I'd be very happy indeed. Maybe somebody in the top 10 could have a little bit of a problem. Liam Lawson nabs a point. He's done really well this afternoon, and the strategy almost played perfectly. Just the two-stopper not quite as good as some of the one-stop strategies ahead. Lewis Hamilton now 2.9 seconds ahead of Albon. But again, needs a 5-second gap, does Lewis Hamilton. Technically, still would finish behind Fernando Alonso right now, does Lewis. With 3 laps left to go, though, the Mercedes needs to go absolutely pedal to metal. Sainz and Leclerc still battling out with one another, but I imagine the Ferrari team on the radio pleading with the two drivers not to take each other out, but Leclerc is desperate for this podium finish in front of the Ferrari faithful. Carlos Sainz started on pole position, is also incredibly desperate to finish in front of his teammate. Stay in front of his teammate in the Drivers' Championship as well. Sainz on the radio. And Sainz on the radio, guys, let me bring this home. I think the problem is Charles Leclerc probably can't be convinced not to have a go at Carlos Sainz. I imagine that Charles Leclerc is probably being told on the radio, maybe hold still. Charles Leclerc is saying absolutely not. Lewis Hamilton now 4 seconds ahead of Alex Albon as well, so would now technically finish in front of Fernando Alonso, but Hamilton still effectively in 8th place. Oscar Piastri, though, has been going really quickly and has got in front of Liam Lawson. And Carlos Sainz, later on the break-in, once again stays ahead of Charles Leclerc. Leclerc was ahead for a moment, but Sainz just a little bit deeper into the corner. On the penultimate lap of the Grand Prix, Carlos Sainz still the lead Ferrari of the two. Someone who we haven't spoken about for a while now, Max Verstappen, out in the lead by 8.5 seconds. And is going to disappear off to get that 10th victory in a row. Here's that replay of Oscar Piastri on Liam Lawson. Ooh. Not sure about that one. Piastri has to jump out of the chicane to get in front of Liam Lawson. Leclerc on the radio. No risk race until the end, Charles Leclerc is told. Logan Sargent with a 5-second penalty as well. Not sure what for. Causing a collision. So here we go then. The final lap of this Grand Prix. Charles Leclerc, DRS wide open down towards turn 1. No risk, Ferrari says. Oh my goodness me, that is a huge lockup from Charles Leclerc. And Leclerc misses out on turn 1 and turn 2. Carlos Sainz retakes 3rd place. And a huge lockup from Leclerc there. That could have been both cars out of this Grand Prix fairly easily, had Leclerc got that wrong. Russell is now 6 seconds behind Charles Leclerc, though, in 5th place. Hamilton has now got that 5-second gap to Alex Albon, so looking like the Mercedes will finish in 3rd. Alex Albon will match his best finish of 7th place if he can keep in front of Lando Norris, who again in the McLaren is still putting Albon under pressure. But there is Max Verstappen coming around the final corner. 10 races in a row. A new record. Beats out Sebastian Vettel's 9 in a row. And it's 10 from 10 for Max Verstappen. But still the Ferraris going right at one another until the line. It's going to be Sergio Perez And Carlos Sainz holds on to third place, just about over his teammate. Charles Leclerc in fourth. Russell and Hamilton will come home just behind in the Mercedes. Fernando Alonso looking at this battle between Albon and Norris. Will Norris have a little go around the final corner? It's the last opportunity to have a go at Albon, who's done really well, really defensively sound, Alex Albon today. And Norris not able to do it. Albon comes home 7th, Norris 8th, Fernando Alonso in 9th, and Bottas, out of nowhere, is going to steal the final points for Alfa Romeo, with Oscar Piastri, after his incident with Lewis Hamilton, missing out on the points in 11th place. Liam Lawson is probably going to come home in 12th place because Logan Sargent's going to have a 5-second penalty. So Lawson in 12th, Sargent 13th. Max Verstappen at 10 races in a row. Turn 5 incident involving Lawson and Piastri under investigation. It did look a little bit awkward between those two. But Max Verstappen, untouchable once again. Carlos Sainz put up a very, very good fight earlier on in the Grand Prix. They tried their absolute best, did Ferrari. But in the end, you just have to bow down to this Red Bull car. It is just so much quicker. Ten in a row. Sergio Perez, happy on the radio, congratulates the team, and the Ferraris and Red Bulls coming down that final straight within touching distance of one another, and the Ferraris gave it their absolute best. But Sainz and Leclerc not quite able to do it. Sainz again. Thanks to the team, congratulates the team, but again, the tyres are the thing, and we've said this time and time again, it feels like, for Ferrari. The tyres are so important for them every single race. They just can't hold on to the tyres for long enough in these Grand Prix, but that is how it stands then. The final running order, once again, Verstappen, Perez, Sainz, Leclerc are top 4. Russell and Hamilton in the Mercedes behind, both of them with 5-second penalties, though neither of them actually mattered in the end. Alex Albon 7th, Lando Norris in 8th place, Fernando Alonso in 9th, and Valtteri Bottas sneaks into the points for Alfa Romeo after Oscar Piastri misses out in 11th place. Lawson, Sargent, Joe, Stroll, Gasly, Hulkenberg, and Magnussen, the two Hasses once again, fairly quick in qualifying, but nowhere near the pace when it came to the race, and just cut through their tyres like crazy. Max Verstappen congratulated by the Red Bull team, and Sergio Perez there as well. They'll stand side by side on the podium once again for the Red Bulls, and they are just getting very, very used to this feeling right now. Haven't been beaten. Red Bull have won every single race this season, and Max Verstappen has just won 10 in a row. We head to Singapore in a couple of weeks' time. Will he make it 11, 12 in Japan, 13 in Qatar? We'll have to wait and see. Carlos Sainz, though, the third and final podium sitter in the Ferrari in front of the Tifosi. The special Ferrari livery and overalls for this weekend. A congratulations to Carlos Sainz from his teammate Charles Leclerc. No love lost between them on the final laps of the Grand Prix. And there it is, the Tifosi they make their way onto the track for the podium celebration and for history as Max Verstappen takes that 10th victory in a row. I'm going to leave you there, though. Thank you all so much for watching. If you're new, leave a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And I will see you in a couple of weeks' time for the Singapore Grand Prix. Whilst you're there, make sure you get your hot takes. Head over to the community tab. Get a hot take in for the Monza Grand Prix to get involved with tomorrow's video. But thank you again. I'll see you next time.